Here with us now is New York Republican Congressman Anthony D'Esposito. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for coming on. Now, as we mentioned before the break, the president expected to sign this executive order in a couple of days, limiting migrants into the U.S. from southern border. Why now and not earlier?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it's the question that House Republicans have been asking since January of 2023. And of course, a little over a year ago when we put H.R. 2 on the books and sent it over to Chuck Schumer, which is and still the only piece of border legislation that actually has passed either side of the House and was probably and is the most comprehensive border security bill that we've seen. Why is he doing it now? I think that it's very simple. It's one word, and it's politics. It's Joe Biden has no interest in securing our southern border. He has no interest in keeping this country safe. What he's interested right now is trying to make sure that he is reelected because he's reviewing the polls. His team is reviewing the polls, and they even in places like blue states of New York, where Democrats historically do well, and places like my district, where Joe Biden won my district in 2020 by 16.5 points. And we've been reviewing polls this last week. And not only is Joe Biden not winning by anything near that, but he's actually losing to Donald Trump. So I think that's exactly why Joe Biden is trying to step up now.
But Congressman, we should mention there was a bipartisan border bill from the Senate. It's been blocked twice just this year. But every time Trump gets in front of a camera, he mentions the border crisis. So why aren't Republicans pushing legislation now to secure the border? They had chances this year.
Absolutely. And we have put legislation on the floor to secure the border. And quite frankly, that bipartisan piece of legislation that still cannot even make it out of the Senate was not a solution. It was a surrender. H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act, which we passed over a year ago, was one of the most comprehensive border security bills that this country has ever seen. It invested millions of dollars in infrastructure and technology along the southern border. It hired Customs and Border Patrol agents. It began building the wall again immediately. Again, new technology at that southern border to make sure that we don't have illegal fentanyl and poison coming into this country. That is where the starting point should have been. Democrats should have sat down when we sent that bill over to the Senate, and Chuck Schumer still has it collecting dust on his desk. That should have been the starting point to have negotiations to begin to secure the border. But until Democrats started seeing these poll numbers, they had no interest in securing the border. And quite frankly, this all started when Joe Biden rescinded the policies of Donald Trump. That's where this began. He has set records along the southern border, and they are not ones that we should be proud of.
Can we agree this authority is what border officials have been asking for, though?
Absolutely. And I'm not sure why President Biden and his administration have sat silently, deciding not to do anything until June of 2024.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He has accepted an invitation to address joint meeting of Congress. As we know, some members of Congress are not happy with this invite. What are you hoping, not only in Congress, but Americans learn when Netanyahu visits, when he addresses Congress and the American people?
I think it's a message that I've been putting forth, for a long time. I represent one of the most Jewish districts anywhere in the country. I have been a staunch supporter of Israel. I believe that the undermining both by the president and Chuck Schumer of the state of Israel and Bibi Netanyahu just days after and weeks after October 7th was completely ridiculous. And I hope that Prime Minister Netanyahu, coming in front of a joint session of Congress, I believe for the fourth time, will show the American people and members of Congress how important this relationship is to maintaining and achieving peace in the Middle East. I hope that he sends a message, which I know he will, that the resources that are provided by the United States of America and this partnership that we have is critically important, not only for the safety of Israel and the safety of the United States of America, but to show that we do support our allies and that we do stand up against terrorism and that we do want to eradicate terrorist organizations and proxies of Iran like Hezbollah and Hamas.
Sir, I have less than a minute, but I want to ask, if Netanyahu does ask for more aid during the visit, how willing will Republicans be to give that aid since they were against giving more aid to Ukraine?
I think we'll have to see what the specific ask is. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has done a better job of identifying where that funding needs to be and exactly what it is being used by. I think that's one of the criticisms
of many when it comes to the funding that we've sent to Ukraine. Where is it going? What is it being used for?
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.